Hello, my name is Theresa Caragol and I'm the CEO of AchieveUnite, and I'm delighted to be here with a colleague, mentor, role model, and just tremendous industry expert, Bob O'Malley. Bob, tell us and everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for having me today. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Yes, I've been in the tech industry for over 30 years. I really won't tell you exactly how many of those years, but the last 25 of those years have been really working with partners and working in a role where I was a CEO or president or a general manager of an operation. And in that period of time, I've had experience buying and selling companies. And so what Teresa asked me to do today is comment a little bit about the nature of M&A in the channel, and particularly today and what I expect over the next few years.
Great, thanks, Bob. So, Bob, what do you think the landscape is today in the tech channel regarding M&A, and especially in this COVID world that we're living in?
Yeah, I think what this COVID world is doing is accelerating a lot of change, and the M&A landscape is no different than other aspects of our business that are accelerating. And there's always been activity in M&A. Some of that activity driven by demographics. You know, we've heard several people talk about the aging population of those running MSP organizations or other related organizations, and as they the word is gray out, and I've got some gray myself, so I can talk to that. They're looking for ways to monetize their life's work in many cases. So that's the dynamic that's working. And there's always been the dynamic of the strong eating the weak. And what COVID has exposed is that there are some business models out there that were weak or that were too dependent on a particular sector, and that sector is under distress. But I'm starting to see something else that's a little bit different, and that's the aggregation of complements. So it's potentially an MSP who's got a very good infrastructure business who wants to add applications, wants to add unified communications, so audio-visual capability, or it's potentially somebody who has a security practice that wants to expand into more of a vertical-oriented practice, leveraging security. So I think we're going to see roll-ups that are not the classic geographic roll-up of like kinds. We're going to see roll-ups of complements, dissimilar but complementary kinds, to create more of a business service organization as opposed to a unique technology service.
When you think about the value of businesses, and you've certainly worked with a lot of partners over the years, IT solution providers, what are the critical elements that they need to be thinking about if they're interested in M&A 3 to 5 years down the road?
Well, okay, we'll separate. We'll first talk about selling. So I think that's what most people are concerned about. I'll add a couple of comments about buying as well. But if you're thinking of selling your business, again, the value to a buyer is in the future. So build your business for the future. Don't starve it for the present to extract as much value as you can today out of it. I mean, in most cases, these businesses are privately owned businesses, so you're not having to go to the public markets for a quarterly report. So you have an opportunity to invest for the long term. So build your business for the future. Plan ahead 3 to 5 years. Secondly, start thinking about who would buy your business. If there's there are different types of buyers. There are financial buyers. Typically, the financial buyers are just looking at numbers and spreadsheets, and they won't value some of the more subtle attributes that you've built into your business. So probably a better fit would be what's called a strategic buyer, somebody whose interests are aligned with yours and sees your business as a way to accelerate their growth and their expansion. Absolutely. So when you're doing that, if you can identify a type of target buyer, then what you can do is start to build relationships with those target buyers, because it's much easier to sell to somebody you know. It's much easier to buy another car of a brand that you've already had experience with, for example. Right. So the more that you can get that together, that's the best. And then And then in that process, in that dialogue process, you'll understand what are really of value to those potential buyers. And then that's an opportunity for you to beef up that component of your value.
So when you think about if a buyer is looking at a business, and what are they considering?
Okay. So now let's switch the table. We'll go from the
Yes,
seller. You want to sell
exactly.
your business to now you're in a position where you think you can buy some business. I was just talking to a friend of mine a week ago who says, "Hey, I think it's time for me to buy some businesses. What do you suggest?" So
Right.
in that concept, there's a book that was written probably 15 years ago called Profit from the Core. It was written by
Yep.
one of the Bain consultants, and in that book, the consultant says there's a lot of profit in your core business. So before you start looking for generating profit and sticking your neck out and trying something new, make sure that you've extracted all the benefits that are inherent in the business that you run today. Well, the reason I bring that up is because they the Bain people then came out with the sequel to that, which is Profit Beyond the Core, because they had to
Yeah,
have a
right.
sequel, right? So the sequel is when you're looking for growth beyond your core business, look for things that are right adjacent to that. So
Mm-hmm.
the reason I mention that is because when you're looking for buying a business, you want to buy a business that complements your core, but potentially is just a little bit outside the core, a little bit beyond the core. So that may be a geographic expansion. That may be back to what I just mentioned about complements and a business that's very much like yours, and you think that putting one and one together will actually equal three.
Right.
Those are the kinds of opportunities you want to look for as a buyer. And then the other thing is understanding what you're buying. Are you buying a revenue stream? Are you buying people? Are you buying intellectual property? Because some of those things you buy can go away. If you buy people, they can quit. So make sure that what you're buying is sustainable, and there are ways to probably build that into the contract as well.
So when you think about mistakes companies made, like what do you see companies doing wrong in this process?
Well, a lot of things. And again, I remember another friend of mine about 10 years ago said, "Hey, I'm thinking of selling my business." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "Well, I've got a term sheet and we're now going through due diligence." Well, that deal didn't happen because once they started going through due diligence, he said, it was like they were calling my baby ugly. I mean, after all, that's the purpose of due diligence. So let me take you through the way the process goes, the way the dance goes, so to speak. First of all, there's some indication of interest, indication on your part, the seller part, that there's an interest on the prospective buyer part that this
Mhm.
might work out. And then that interest is, okay, let's look under the tent a little bit and see what's
Mhm.
going on here.
Right.
And if the interest stays keen, then there's a letter of intent or a term sheet or something that says, "Hey, here's what I think you're worth. Here's what I'm willing to pay, and then here's how we're going to go and validate that interest, that amount of money." And that's where the due diligence starts. And another friend of mine who's done a lot of M&A in this work says nothing good happens in due diligence. So if you're in the process of selling, make sure you understand
Right.
that, because due diligence is where the buyer and the buyer's financial team is supposed to find out all the warts in the business.
Mhm.
And when they bring those warts out, you're kind of insulted. It's kind of like somebody coming to do a home inspection on a home you're buying. Things that were perfectly fine to you, all of a sudden they find big issues with, and they want to extract some value from you in the
Mhm.
transaction. And then there's if everything goes all right through due diligence, excuse me, and then you find, hey, we can make this deal happen.
Right.
There'll be a closing of sort, a little bit like a home sale closing. And then typically with small businesses, there's some kind of earnout. So the buyer wants to keep your skin in the game as a seller. So they will contract with you, and they'll
Right.
make sure you
Or,
stay around to work. And typically 3 years is kind of normal.
yeah.
Uh, that's those 3 years are somewhat problematic because no longer are you running the show.
I see this
Uh,
so many
and
times. It's
and
painful.
and the buyer wants to do things
Right.
that in your earnout is based upon achieving certain milestones. So you don't want to do them because it's gonna destroy the amount of
Mhm.
compensation you get. So there are problems associated with every step. And probably, if I said 1 out of 10, that may be optimistic. That actually
Mhm.
go through that whole process and come out of it with still being friends in the process in the outcome.
In the outcome. Well, give us, a last question for today. Give us just a couple of best practices. What are must-haves in these types of deals?
Well, I think there are a couple things that I should mention that I haven't yet mentioned. Is the more you can understand the way companies are valued, the better you are, because that'll allow you in 3 to 5 years ahead of time to
Yeah.
actually start setting your company up to meet those markers. And I saw a report recently where if you take a look at EBITDA, which is your profitability, and I'll let somebody else explain EBITDA and the way that the mechanics work, but EBITDA is a measure of your profitability,
Right.
and then growth. So those
Yeah.
are the two financial factors that are important to the business. And I saw a chart recently where it peaked out where the adding EBITDA percent and growth percent came out to around 25 to 30%. So you should be
Wow.
thinking about in that area. And if you aren't in
Right.
that area, then you should be going back. Remember, growth in this case, growth is as important as profitability. Uh,
Exactly. Right.
and so if your mindset is not on growth today, if your mindset is hey, I'm comfortable now, everything's fine, get
Right.
off that pony, get onto a growth horse. So that's one,
Yeah.
is understanding the mechanism and understanding the role that profitability and growth play in the evaluation. Second is risk. What you look at as risk is just a small fragment of what the buyer will look at, because
Right.
you know your people, the way the company has been run. The buyer does not know that. So if there's
Right.
any way that you can mitigate risk in the process, that will be appreciated in the buyer. So one of my relationships in the business world is a company called Insperity, and Insperity outsources HR. So they take all the employee risk away from the business owner, and they
Right.
complement and support the business owner. Much like in the IT world, the MSP is the outsourced IT, the virtual
Right.
CIO. Insperity becomes a virtual head of human resources. So because there essentially is no risk related to the people side of the business. I've known companies that have gotten higher valuations because they have managed the risk in that fashion. So risk is an important thing.
Yeah.
Understand the risk going in. To the extent that you, the seller, can mitigate risk, you'll be financially better off down the road. And then the
Great.
third thing I would mention is really know what you want. You're going to come out of this and you want something. I mean, you're going through this whole process for some reason. What is it that you want? And stick to your
Mhm.
guns. I mean, if you'll need to walk away from a few deals. I mean, any deal that you can't walk away from is you're probably not in the right business. And
Right.
I remember going to a seminar on negotiations many years ago, and the speaker was Art Dickelson, and Art had written some books on the art of negotiation, and he had one statement that obviously I've never forgotten. He said, when you're negotiating and selling a company or buying a company is
Right.
negotiating, right? We're negotiating.
Absolutely.
You've got to care, but not that much. So don't
Hmm.
be afraid. If something's going wrong, don't be afraid to walk away. If the
Right.
buyer's really interested, they'll come back.
They'll come
Yeah,
back. Right.
all right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bob. This was incredibly insightful and helpful, and appreciate you joining me today. So thanks a lot.
Good. And I would say to all the buyers and sellers out there, good luck. It happens every single day. It's not something you're doing uniquely. And the more you can learn going into it, the better off you're going to be.
Better off you're going to be coming out of it. Absolutely. Well, good. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.